Today, I'm looking at another way to speed paint or batch paint my miniatures. I will be using one specialty product for this paint up, but the results I've been getting with this method outshine other speed painting methods such as base shade highlight or slap chop. It's not only faster than those two methods, but I feel that the finished models look much more refined on the tabletop. Welcome to Treehane Miniatures. I'm choosing to speed paint the breeder miniatures from the Nemesis board game for this demonstration. The approach I'm using today is mechanically very similar to using a colored primer as a base coat for base shade highlight batch painting. But the main time saver with this approach is that the base coat, shading, and highlights are all wrapped up in a single step with a single application of paint. No dry brushing, no painting within the lines. We're applying one coat of paint over the entire model. Blue Raspberry is my color of choice for these Nemesis breeders. This is a Turbo Dork color shift paint that provides deep shadows and bright highlights. These paints can also have very interesting shifts in hue that place entirely different colors in the shadows than it does on the highlights. Blue Raspberry shifts from blue highlights to red-violet in the shadows. It's a little difficult to make out the color shift under bright studio lights, but it is very apparent in person. Some of these paints have a distinct metallic appearance, but others, such as this Blue Raspberry, have more of a smooth, iridescent color gradient to them. The first step is to shake the crap out of this paint. It does have a mixing ball inside it, so I decide to shake it by hand until it's thoroughly mixed. Many of the color shift paints appear white in the bottle, and this won't change no matter how much you shake them. This makes it challenging to know when I've mixed the paint thoroughly enough. The best way I've found to thin Turbo Dork paints is to use this inexpensive airbrush thinner from Hobby Lobby. It contains an acrylic copolymer that helps keep metallic paint pigments in suspension while thinning. Turbo Dork also makes its own proprietary thinning medium, but it's quite a bit more expensive and feels more viscous than this does. If painting with a standard brush, Turbo Dork recommends using a dry palette instead of a wet palette and thinning the paint only with a little of this thinning medium. Apply the paint with a large brush in several thin coats, allowing each coat to fully dry between applications. For this airbrush demonstration, I begin thinning the paint with the Hobby Lobby thinner. Then I add a little flow improver to the mix to help it flow through the airbrush even more easily. Most Turbo Dork paints recommend painting directly over a black primer, and I chose ColorForge Matte Black for this. Turbo Dork also recommends using a 0.5 mm airbrush with the air pressure set to 30 psi. I'm experimenting with the new Gallery Turbox Mini while painting these, so I'm not able to meet those specifications. The Turbox Mini comes with a 0.35 mm airbrush, which, according to Turbo Dork, is fine for their paints as well. However, with this size airbrush, the Turbox Mini maxes out at about 11 psi with the paint flowing through it. This did cause me to have to thoroughly clean the airbrush a couple of times over the course of painting 12 miniatures. I'm not sure this would have been any different with a larger compressor. Turbo Dork paint is a little tricky to work with. I spray the color as evenly as possible all over the model. I stop my application of paint before it begins to pool in the recesses. Because metallic paint pigment can be heavier than other pigments, it has more of a tendency to flow into the recesses. A little patience on my part will help avoid this. I'm applying the paint in a couple of thin coats, and I allow each coat to dry as I work on other models. It's oddly satisfying for me to see how fast the full effect of this paint is represented on the model. I was incredibly skeptical before I first used color shift paint. I couldn't imagine that it would look this vibrant over black primer. I know it's typical to paint metallics over a black base layer, but the brilliance of this paint is immediately stunning. The bright studio lights rob this paint of some of its effect, but when I set up a single light on the side of the miniature, the shift from blue to red-violet is a little more apparent. On top of this, the type of light present greatly affects the color of this paint. Morning sunlight coming through my studio window makes this miniature look primarily red with blue in the shadows. It's remarkable. Unless anybody has another suggestion, I would recommend performing a deep clean on your airbrush after using Turbo Dork paints through it. The consistency of this paint can best be described as gummy. You can see how elastic and sticky it is as I pull it off the side of my airbrush. As I was batch painting, I could hear the paint flow diminishing towards the end of the painting session. Because of this, I felt I needed to perform a deep cleaning between some of the paint colors, instead of the usual quick flush that I normally do. By the way, I always hear how the enemies from this game are basically knockoffs from the Alien movies, but is anyone else getting Halo Covenant Elite vibes from these guys? Now we just have to go back and paint the parts of the Mini that we don't want to have this iridescent scarab-like appearance to them. I begin with a base coat of Death Reaper by Duncan Rhodes 2 Thin Coats. I'm covering all of the fleshy bits of the creature except for its neck and biceps. Much like using colored primer as a base layer, this requires some precision to avoid getting the new color on the blue raspberry exoskeleton. I'm using this to provide just enough color separation between the various blue sections of the exoskeleton. This will make the color shifting effect look even more spectacular. Then I do the same thing with Dark Plum Pro Acryl on the remaining squishy bits. This includes the breeder's biceps, neck, and mouth. The biceps on this miniature have well-defined striations, which make them easy to paint. The breeder's legs also have this feature, but I decided not to paint them with Dark Plum. I feel that this would draw attention away from the alien's face and upper torso. Plus, I'm speed painting, so the fewer details I concern myself with, the better. I'm using purple on the biceps, neck, and face to draw more attention there. The Dark Plum areas are going to receive the most dramatic highlights. The preliminary highlights are made with a mix of Dark Plum Pro Acryl and Vallejo Ice Yellow. These areas are incredibly easy to highlight since they're made up of very prominent raised parallel ridges. I mostly use the side of my brush to drag paint along the raised surfaces, and I leave the Dark Plum untouched in the recesses. The final highlight for the purple areas is pure ice yellow. This is going to make the skin look a little reflective and add some shine to the mouth. Every additional color and highlight we add to the model serves to intensify the dramatic appearance of the blue exoskeleton on this alien baddie. I highlight the dark gray flesh with a quick application of Wolf Gray by the Army Painter. I use a fairly opaque consistency of paint to block in these highlights. I keep these highlights small to preserve the dark appearance of the skin. I'm not attempting to blend this with the dark gray at this point. Any rough edges will be remedied in the next step. To fix the rough edges on the highlights, I thin down some Death Reaper to brush over the highlights. This is thinned with water to a glaze consistency. I'm applying this all over the highlights as I would with a wash. This will tone down the brightness of the Wolf Gray and help it blend with the surrounding Death Reaper a little more naturally. The final touch for this piece is to paint the eyes. I first dot in some titanium white. Then I dab some translucent glistening blood effect paint over the white so the eyes appear bright red. Using Turbo Dork Color Shift paint is a great way to quickly paint iridescent scarab effects or vehicles and armor on your board game miniatures. Using Turbo Dork definitely comes with its challenges, but I feel the results are worth it. I'd like to thank my amazing channel members for supporting what I do on this channel. You too can become a channel member for as little as $1.99 per month and receive perks such as early access to videos, extended versions of our painting tutorials, and even a tier that lets you choose which miniature I paint next. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.